Hello, hello. I can't hear you. Can you hear me?
Sorry.
I hope so. Hey, I can hear you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam, man. Give me 1 second. I'm just going to switch my ports real quick.
Sure.
All right, here you go. You got me?
Got you. We'll just give people a few minutes to filter in.
Does it look fine to you?
I have to scrutinize your bookshelf to give you a
Please
complete
do.
answer to that, but
Some solid books there.
looks good though.
All right. I actually wore a shirt for you. For this, like the second time in 6 months I've done this. So for the Muslim lawyers who are the professionals doing the career that I should have done, this is what I've done to honor you.
I won't ask if you're wearing shorts or.
No comment.
Okay.
There might be some pajamas. So is it just gonna be Q&A? We're gonna talk, and then just talk, right?
Yeah. So we'll just do like 45 minutes of that, and then.
Yeah, man. You just throw questions at me. I'll be as honest as possible, and whatever happens, happens. Let's see.
Very cool. Yeah, we'll just give people maybe we'll start in like 5 minutes or so.
Take your time. I'm here. I will look awkwardly down.
Excellent.
At my. I shared it, so you should get. I don't know. Let's see. Hello, Ms. Sauber.
Hello, nice to see you. Looking forward to your conversation.
Thank you so much. Your check is in the mail.
You look groomed.
I did this for you. I just trimmed my facial hair. I actually washed my face. These are the things I do as a grown-up adult. I wore, like I said, I wore this collared shirt.
Yeah, and we didn't have to pay a speaking fee even.
I'm an idiot. I did it for free. It's fine. I don't mind. I don't mind if it could be helpful or fun. Let's do it.
How have things been? Have you been very busy these past few months?
Yeah. I mean, like we can't complain, right? Like everyone's going through a pandemic. People are, I think Cuomo said in like late March, he said coronavirus has flattened us, has flattened all of us, but it's not really accurate. Hasn't flattened all of us equally. People who are poor, Black and brown communities, immunocompromised, like you people are in pain. So it's always important for me to say that, like, so comparative to everyone else, like, alhamdulillah, as we say. But we also have 3 kids, and we could talk about this. We had a crazy last year. And then, so the funny thing was, my wife in January was like, oh, we'll get our life back to normal. And then coronavirus happened. So it's kind of like, we're just exhausted. And our baby started crawling 2 weeks ago. And that's been a game changer, man. She's like, it's over. Because I was trying to figure out, like, the last 2 weeks, why are we so exhausted? And I realized, like, oh yeah, because like Khadija crawls and she's like a speed demon. So because back then, like 2 weeks ago, she was useless. So you could just put her somewhere and like, she's not gonna move. But now it's just like I have to grow like a 4th eyeball. But it's all good. You can't complain compared to what other people are going through. I mean, we're just exhausted. I don't know how it is in where are you, New York?
I'm in DC also.
Oh, in DC, yeah. So you guys saw last night, right? Like the heavens raged, and so at 5 a.m., all the electricity in our house went out, and then all the babies decided to wake up at the same time, and then no one went to sleep till 8 a.m. So, and I was actually up writing this book that I'm supposed to write, and then so I slept at 8 a.m. So the fact that I slept at 8 a.m. and I'm looking like this, come on now, these are the wins. These are the wins of life.
For folks who are on the line, we're just giving people a couple more minutes to filter in, and if you could just keep yourselves on mute until the Q&A, that would be great.
Or you guys can be that really obnoxious, annoying person who thinks that they're on mute and they're not, and we can hear your entire like chaotic conversation, but then we have to like make faces and pretend that we can't hear. That's the best.
or flush the toilet.
Yeah. Someone should be on the toilet right now, or someone should have like a spousal argument. Someone should be making like very politically incorrect statements, and then in the middle of it all, figure out that you actually are not muted. Especially on Zoom, which is a very safe safe medium, which of course has never been hacked and cannot be recorded. And by the way, for those of you who have joined, I promise nothing. My kids will most likely interrupt from that door. 3 wildlings. I'm trying my best. This is as good as it gets. But
Leave the door open, please.
What's that?
I said leave the door open, please.
Oh, no. You don't want this. It's chaos. But they know. They usually actually gone pretty good. I think kids adapt. Kids adapt pretty quick. Like they know about coronavirus, know about quarantine. They know about like, this is now my work space, which is nonsense. When you have 3 kids, there's nothing called workspace during lockdown. But they kind of know when Baba has his headphones on and is actually wearing pants, that it's serious. So.
Well, I think we should go ahead and get started because we don't have all that much time, and really thankful for the hour you're giving us. My name is Alamin Sumar. I'm the director of social outreach with the Capital Area Muslim Bar Association, known as CAMBA. This is Sana Chaudhary, who is a CAMBA groupie and also my girlfriend. We're just so excited to have you here, Wajahat. Just for everybody, before we get started, please keep yourselves on mute. If you have a question, just feel free to shoot it to me in the chat at any point during the event. And then when we get to the Q&A, I can sort of call people out in that order. And I'll just give you, it's a guy who needs no introduction, but I'll give you one anyway. Wajahat Ali is a New York Times contributing op-ed writer, a TED speaker, an award-winning playwright, a recovering attorney, a former consultant for the US State Department also. He has given keynote speeches around the world. His writing also regularly appears in the New York Times, along with The Atlantic, The Washington Post, and The Guardian. He helped launch the Al Jazeera America Network as a co-host of The Stream, a daily news show that extended the conversation to social media and beyond. And as a playwright, Wajahat is the author of The Domestic Crusaders. Get your copy.
Oh, look at that. You got an old school hard copy. Well done, sir.
It's the first major play about Muslim Americans post 9/11, which was published by McSweeney's and performed off-Broadway and at the Kennedy Center. There's more to say, but we don't.
That's enough. Thank you. My wife is probably hearing that right now and saying that man sounds like a badass. Who is that guy? And that was obviously that bio data was written by my mother. So don't believe the hype. But thank you for making me sound awesome. I appreciate that. That's good.
Well, let's go. You mentioned your mother. Let's go to your roots. You're a child of Pakistani immigrant parents, grew up in the Bay Area, and you say that you went to school wearing husky pants and knowing only 3 words of English.
That's right.
Tell us about what your upbringing was like, kind of what took you to law school, what your life in the law was like, and sort of how you ended up where you are today.
Yeah, so I was born and raised in the Bay Area, California. My parents, I'm sure like many immigrants of South Asian descent, they came here after the 1965 Immigration Nationality Act, which actually lifted the restrictive quotas that were placed in this country in 1924 to keep out the original invaders, which at the time were pretty much immigrants of color and Eastern European and Southern Europeans. I'm talking about Italians and Eastern European Jews. And there was that, people always forget that, right? Like a lot of times what's happening with the Muslim ban, it's oftentimes a remake in America. So those quotas that were put in place finally got lifted. And the reason why that's so important is that so many of us who came, right, as the children of those Pakistani, South Asian immigrants who were able to become lawyers and doctors, oftentimes we grew up with this fallacy that, if you just work hard and you pull yourself up from the bootstraps, that myth of meritocracy, that you too can make it. And look at these other immigrants who are just lazy and poor. Well, not really. There were 2 major, I would call them the Willy Wonka golden tickets of life that I think our ancestors got. First of all, was the 1965 Immigration Nationality Act. There had to be like that specific, think about it, right? Like that time that you got that passed, my father and his older brother, Sultan Uncle, were graduate students in Karachi. And my father said, when that happened, 1966, I was in America. I was in America with Sultan Uncle, right? So first was the timing. If you were alive at the time, and if you were at a certain age around 1965 to take advantage of the Immigration Act of 1965 that made the racial quotas illegal, right? The opening, I would call it. Number 2, if you were lucky enough in those original countries to have the access to education. And I think about this often because I go back to Pakistan a lot and I look at all the people who are poor and I'm like, the only difference between me and this kid hacking it in Rainbow Center in Karachi, like this brilliant kid who's like straight up making like his own PS4s, is that my father got to come here due to the Immigration Act of 1965, and that my dada, my grandfather, back in the day, pre-partition, was able to make a little bit of money in India, and he made the deliberate decision to save that money and to like invest it in the education of his kids. Boom, that's it. If that didn't happen, I would not be here, right? So I think that's really important to connect the dots, because everyone wants to say like, oh, we made it in meritocracy, but there was also luck and privilege that was involved. So my father came here in 1966, and just like Melania Trump, he did something called chain migration and then brought his entire clan, the entire paternal family. And what's important is that like my dadi came, my grandmother, and there's photos of my dadi who's like passed away, who literally was in bell bottoms listening to Doobie Brothers with her like bangles and makeup, and she kept all her jewelry in these Royal Dansk blue containers. I don't know if anyone who's was listening right now knows these. It's like all immigrants genetically are predisposed to putting all their jewelry and spices in these Royal Dansk biscuit containers, right? My dada came, my grandfather, like my chacha, my chachis, my uncles, my aunts, they all came. And a lot of people say, you know, we burned the boat when we came here and we assimilated to American culture. My parents brought the boat inside the home. So I grew up in the Bay Area, California, and my parents thought it'd be hilarious not to teach me English. And so I didn't know any English till I was like 5. We spoke like perfect Urdu because my dada, my grandfather said, I want to teach this kid Urdu. And so there's videos of me and my cousins, all born and raised in this country, like from the age of 4 or 5. And it literally looks like you're in Karachi, Pakistan. We're like just speaking fluent Urdu, total fobs, born and raised in this country. Because my parents thought, who would, you know, why teach my child English in America? I was an only child, which if anyone who's not South Asian realizes makes me a brown unicorn because we're very breeding people. It wasn't because my parents were so disappointed after having me. It's because my mom just couldn't get pregnant afterwards. There was 2 miscarriages. So I was an only child. I didn't speak English. Born and raised in California. My dadi and my dada and my parents lived with me. Old school setup, 3 generations in one house in Fremont, California. I was also very mashallah, which means I was also very big boned, which means I was very healthy, which means I was fat. I was a really fat kid. I was so fat that I was known as the fat kid in school, right? Like back in the day, like nowadays, everyone has like Dove soap commercials. We didn't have any Dove soap commercials. We didn't have any positive body images. There was none of that. Back in the day, if you were fat, every day was World War III, for those of you who are healthy and remember. So I was that kid. And my mom was very skinny, didn't realize how she could give birth to this mashallah beast of a boy. And so the only pants that I could wear, and this was really important, like this imprinted in my memory, were husky pants. And any kid who grew up like healthy, like husky pants, when you say husky pants, it triggers like trauma, because it used to be like the end of the aisle of Sears where you used to pass all the normal kids pants and pass like the upper class kids pants, and there was like this section called husky. And I've joked about this before, but the husky pants, to further humiliate the person wearing the husky pants, on the right side of your butt, in big ass font and letters, it said husky. So that was me. And I was shy, and I was sick, and I was left-handed. And they tried to convert me from left-handed to right-handed, because of those of you who are Muslim, who grew up in Asian cultures, only one thing can be done with the left hand, and that refers to the bathroom activities. So they tried to convert me, and I always joke about this. I always felt like I was undercooked, or like Allah drew me askew. Like I felt like Allah sneezed while he was making me, and he just like messed up a little bit, and he just thought it would be funny. So he just released me out into the world. And I have OCD from my father's side. I had a heart condition from my other father's side, which also shows you that if you marry as cousins, don't marry your first cousins. There was a lot of first cousin marriage in my paternal grandmother's side. So that was me growing up, which is basically to say I was a winner. And that was my upbringing. But the flip side, to answer your question on how it ended up, me being a lawyer, is I had this decision to make early on. Because much like, I'm sure like many of the people listening, I was often the token Muslim. I was often the token brown guy. And it isn't until you get to like school, I remember it was like first grade, where you realize that other people don't have turmeric stains. And you don't like, you're like, how come people are speaking this weird language called English? Why is everyone so weird? How come I'm only the only brown person? And then you realize you're the outlier in America, and you realize you're the other in America. And so in a strange way, growing up, I was always the unofficial ambassador of Pakistan, Muslims, Islam, and anything brown for all my friends. And I remember I had to like give multiple speeches about anything to do with Islam. I remember it was the Iraq War. It was like elementary school, and like they're like, Wajahat, why don't you talk about Iraq? I'm like, I'm Pakistani. They're like, whatever. And I remember in high school, my teacher was like, I went to an all-boys Jesuit Catholic high school, and my teacher was like, why don't you tell us about the hijab? I'm like, I'm a boy. Like, it's fine. Just talk about the hijab. And so I remember like, I didn't speak English until I was like in first grade, and they put me in ESL, even though I was born and raised in America. And in ESL, this is a true story, they just used to try to teach me how to pronounce my W's and V's, and I just could never get it. So it just used to be like 30 minutes of me sitting in a room with like two Asian girls, like me saying whatever. And they're like, whatever, Wajahat? I'm like, whatever. And that was me. But this experience in a way helped me because I was always very creative. I always liked telling stories. But growing up, you kind of always realize, being where I grew up as Muslim and Desi in that culture, that there were only three like occupations: doctor, engineer, business. Lawyer came in after 9/11, to be honest. And so in the back of my head, I always knew I wanted to do this weird career, but I never really saw that many people like me. And so it was a process of discovery. And I did law because I wanted a tool in my Batman utility belt. I always thought law would be a very useful tool, but I always knew even during law school, I would not be a traditional lawyer, to the point where I did plays in law school, casting my law professors. And they had me MC and organize their annual talent show at UC Davis called Cardozo Rama. And I remember all of my law professors were like, Wajahat, man, just don't become a lawyer. I'm begging you. I'm like, dude, this is like a diss. Like, are you saying I'm dumb? They're like, no, you'll be fine. You're smart. You're a really good student, but just don't waste your time, man. Escape. And I found out so many of my law professors like secretly want to be writers and like opera singers, but like they live vicariously through me. Even to this day, like my biggest fans are my legal community from UC Davis. We're like, Wajahat, never do law, man. You got out, bro. It's like the Hollywood movie, like Dangerous Minds. There's always like one minority that gets out of the ghetto. And so like, Wajahat, you're the one that got out, man. Fulfill our dreams. I'm like, it's not too late for you. He goes, it's over for us. I'm like, you're only 42. I'm like, there's no hope. It's done. So you write for the New York Times. So anyway, you asked me and I tried to give you my life story in 6 minutes. There you go.
That's really interesting. I mean, for those of us who, have heard of you, but we sort of don't know what your day-to-day is like, other than, I mean, I know because you're there trolling President Trump and his supporters, which I really appreciate.
Thank you. Someone's got to do
it. What sort of kept you sane during the pandemic? How have you been living day to day?
Yeah, so I just saw that there's a chat. Justin is my brother in Husky Jeans Kids Club, and he will testify that everything I said is absolutely on point. All Husky kids must unite together. What's keeping me sane during the pandemic? We were having this conversation before the participants signed up. We've had an interesting experience. For those of you who don't know, last April, my daughter Nuseba, who was at the time 2, and had turned 3, and you could hear her crying in the background right now because she wants Cookie Crisps. She was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer last April. And it was stage 4 means it metastasizes, right? So it went from all over her liver, and there was a spot in her lungs. It like literally went like this overnight. And we didn't think she'd survive May, because there were so many complications. She needed chemotherapy. Her chemotherapy was delayed. And we were in search of a liver transplant because it was all over her liver. So that was our year. And knock on wood, thanks to Sean Zahir, who at the time was anonymous, she got a liver transplant in September, and she was declared cancer-free in January. Now, the reason why I mentioned this is, in a weird way, we had like, I call the danger room simulation of the pandemic last year. That's my X-Men reference. There will be many comic book references. We were socially isolating. We were in and out of hospitals. My kids know everything there is to know about sanitizing, right? They know everything it is to know about wearing masks. And in a strange way, my kids, Ibrahim, who's going to turn 6, inshallah, in 2 weeks, and Nusayba, who just turned 4, they adapted to a new normal, which was chaos. Every day was disrupted. In January, she was declared cancer-free, and my wife, after we endured this insane year, she came to me and she said, wow, we just survived this. We have to now plot normalcy. We have to think about how to re-enter life. And coronavirus happened. And my wife's a doctor. And because my daughter is immunocompromised, because she has a new liver in her body, and because she has friends who are epidemiologists, I got to give Sarah credit. She was on top of this. She called it. She goes, America's going to get effed. We're going to be in lockdown. This is going to be a disaster. This was January. I'm like, and I was, I kept abreast with it because I wrote about it, and, I was asked to talk about it. And because of Nusayba, I had to take it very carefully. But I was like, Sarah, you might be worrying a bit too much. Like, she goes, no. She's like, this is going to be lockdown, March, lockdown. And so we did lockdown in February, and we have actually endured it much better than most because my kids have gone through hell the past year. My kids love lockdown. My kids are like, let's never leave home. And my son and Nusayba know everything about coronavirus, and they're very sharp. And we told them everything about cancer. We've talked to them, not necessarily as adults because they're kids, but Sarah, my baby, Nusayba, at the age of 3 was like, this is my NG tube and I'm having a liver transplant. There's cancer in my belly. Like, she knew everything. And her brother, Ibrahim, knew everything. And Ibrahim, if you talk to him now, he goes, Baba, don't touch that Amazon box. You might get coronavirus. Did you sanitize your hands? I'm like, who are you, my dada? What just happened? So compared to most, we have done fine. And it's because of the experience of what we endured with Nusayba and the cancer that we have the type of learned resilience that we have tried to, we tried to share this experience with other people who are really struggling. Like, give up normal, live in the moment, give yourself, like, every day some moment of levity and joy. That's something you can feel control over. Share your vulnerability, talk to your friends, talk about how you're in pain, right? These are small things, like small pieces of advice that we've given people that they go, this was very helpful to me because we've endured it. So it's tough. And while this happened, last year, my wife was pregnant. So she gave birth to Khadija on November 5th. Khadija dropped 10 days early. And the story goes that Nusayba was recovering at Children's Hospital from her second post-chemo. Sarah went to Georgetown for a checkup. She goes, I think I'm going to have a baby. I was with the kids, Ibrahim and Nusayba, at Children's. Sarah was at Georgetown. Our friend Uzma, I think, who's a participant, went and FaceTimed the birth of Khadija. And then a day later, Sarah, being a beast, is like, I'm fine. And she's like, I went and picked her up, and she went over back to the hospital. So that's been our life. It's been tough. There was a thunderstorm here. Any parent who survives, any parent who wears clothes, any parent of a small child who hasn't gone insane and manages to wear somewhat clean clothes during the pandemic, I empathize with you, and you're my hero. It's tough. We predict that school is going to be canceled. And so there's that Ben Affleck meme where he's looking like this, completely exhausted. Like, I don't know if you've seen it, right? From last year. Like, he just came out, he's like a cigarette in his hand. That's all parents. I think it's going to be us in the next month, because my kid ain't going to Zoom. He's 5 going on 6. And so we're going to have to either homeschool, I think, or defer. So ask me in a month, I think we're all going to go crazy. But it's going to be tough, man. I think this is a humbling experience for anyone who's been trying to work. I think, if anything, the last thing I'll say about this is I hope we emerge as a more empathetic and generous nation that realizes the struggles of single parents, the struggles of poor people, the struggle of essential workers who we call essential but are not treated as essential because they aren't giving a living wage, who are dying, from Black and brown communities. And maybe we'll empathize with parents, especially moms, and give paid parental leave that we don't have in this country, and give affordable healthcare. Because if we do emerge, and we emerge the same, this country is broken. I think what coronavirus has done has given us a brilliant X-ray of this country, of our warts, of our glories, of our sins, of our successes, and of our dysfunctions, of our political dysfunctions. And so there is a hope here that if we emerge, and inshallah we have to have hope, that we can emerge better only by not only advocating for, but literally bringing about systemic change. Because absent that, these inequities will continue. And there's this final thing I'll say is it's a human nature. Only when we experience pain, if you've noticed, do we realize the sins that were under our own very nose, right? It's only when we personally experience pain. And if I want to tie it to politics, I've been predicting for 4 years, they always ask me, what will make the Trump voter change? I've always said this: immense personal pain. And even after they experience immense personal pain, I predicted only some of them will be won over. And lo and behold, if you look at the data, immense personal pain. I thought it would be a recession. I never predicted it would be a pandemic. And there's nothing more immense and personal and painful than death of a family member. And I think things are going to get a lot worse in the next 3 months. I think we're going to hit 200,000 deaths by November. I think Trump is going to degenerate, like you're seeing it today. Now, apparently Biden has declared war on God, and apparently Thailand is Thailand, and there's demon semen in Thailand, but there's God maybe in Thailand, and there's Semites. And the best part about that clip, for you guys that saw the Yosemite clip, is Trump never corrected himself. He said, yo Semites, yo Semite, yo Semite, and he just kept going. He never even corrected Yosemite. So I think this country is in for a reckoning. I think it's going to be very painful for the next 3 months, but there's inshallah going to be an opportunity, and it's going to take all of us to push us forward. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
I mean, so what about beyond these 3 months? I mean, it's really hard to have experienced what all of us on this call have for the past, almost 4 years and be kind of optimistic. It felt like we went from the Mueller investigation to impeachment to the pandemic to talk of, and not talk, action of defunding the USPS. We could undermine the election. The prospect of a president who on election night is going to be defeated and say, no, actually, this was right.
That's right.
How bleak is this country's future? And I'm self-interested here because I'm a Canadian and I still have a passport and could go back. So depending on what you say, I may or may not walk out the door right now.
Yeah, it's look, we have to be honest. And I'll give you an example of tying it back to your first question about my father. My father's been in this country for over 50 years. He came here in 1966. And I'll start cynical, I'll end optimistic. We went through the Iraq War. We went through the Bush years. We went through the economic recession of 2008. We went through 1966, 67, 68, the Vietnam War. This is the first time ever my father, who has been in this country for over 50 years, has actually actively told me that he is searching for other countries because he doesn't know what will happen in this country. And he is in his 70s. He says, I'm not worried about me. I'm worried about my grandkids. And he's like, Beta, like I get this call every 3 weeks. Beta, what about New Zealand? New Zealand's good. I'm like, yes, they have hobbits. It's fantastic. He goes, what about Canada? What about Vancouver? Vancouver looks good. But the fact that a man who's been in this country for 50 years, the fact that generation that left Pakistan, that they believe that America will no longer welcome them and their grandkids, that's very sobering. Or that this country that they literally left everything for will not be a habitable place, that there will be other countries, right? Shows you how low America has fallen, not just in the eyes of so many of our allies. I mean, the irony is, and I feel like sometimes we're living in a Quranic story or an Old Testament story, is Trump wanted a wall. There's literally a wall around America right now because our passport is worthless because we're the epicenter of coronavirus, where countries are like, yo, don't come to America. It's literally like I'm seeing an alternative vision of like the Pharaoh story, but like Trump is the incompetent Pharaoh, right? And like, it's like all the warnings are there. It's like Musa al-Islam, for those of you who are not familiar with 10 Commandments, starring the prophet Charlton Heston. Moses is like literally like, yo, I'm representative of God. I'm giving you some signs. There's going to be blood in the water. Blood comes in the water, and the Pharaoh is like, I don't believe you. Then he's like, yo, there's going to be frogs from the sky. Frogs come from the sky. He's like, I don't believe you. No. He's going, next up, there's going to be locusts. And then still there are people like, no, I'm still not going to wear a mask. No, it's a conspiracy theory. So how do you save a country where a third of the country, I believe, I predicted 2 years ago, is lost for my lifetime, thanks to the right-wing ecosystem and disinformation bubble, where literally scientists and facts are being attacked, where one of the political parties is increasingly an extremist minority party willing to burn it all down. They don't believe in climate change. Where, as we predicted, now, I'm not the only one, but I said it on CNN, I said it on tweets. You could go look at the tweets. I was called crazy. I said this dude's going to cheat. I said he's going to say the election is rigged. I said he's not going to leave. And you should go back and look at my tweets. People are like, you're crazy. The guy openly admits it now. He's literally telling you how he's going to cheat. Like just telling you, he goes, I'm going to attack mail-in voting. I'm not going to concede. With his interview with Chris Wallace, he says, you know, he didn't commit to confirming whether or not he's going to accept the election results. And what's going to happen, my prediction is Biden's going to win, inshallah. He should win. They're going to cheat. They're going to get foreign interference. You just saw that Daily Beast article today that said foreign hostile actors are posing as agitated Black social media activists trying to exploit the religious and racial divides, which is exactly what Russia did. It's open season for foreign interference. Trump was impeached for it. So things are going to get worse in this country, I think, until November. It's going to get bad. Coronavirus, more deaths, more disinformation. And we have institutions that are responsible, including the media, who engage in a both sides false equivalence. To this day, literally last week, they're like, I think Trump has changed his tone. Hasn't he changed his tone? I'm like, no, he has not changed his tone. He's still Trump. And a day later, Trump is Trump. Because they all benefit from this ecosystem that rewards a certain type of model behavior where they desperately want Trump to be presidential so they can get on with business. But Trump is not normal. He is a wannabe authoritarian. And the Republican Party has revealed its authoritarian stripes, in my opinion. And how does a democracy survive when one of the major political parties and the conservative ideological movement has become so extreme? I don't know the answer to that question, Alameen. I don't know. But what I do know, and this is the flip side, to the hopeful side, is during a pandemic, during a coronavirus that has killed 160,000, probably more, you saw a record number of people come out in the streets to protest against police brutality and systemic racism and to take a knee for Black Lives Matter. They have said that once you gather all those protests, it is the largest demonstration in US history. The last largest demonstration in US history was 4 years ago for the Me Too movement. And you're seeing the election of individuals who look like you and me. You're seeing grassroots supports. You're seeing anger and outrage and frustration. And there's something about a righteous anger that compels change that could give us one opportunity, in my opinion, for Biden and hopefully the Democrats and hopefully for grassroots actors to implement a new deal. And there is something, I think if you look at November and you look at the polling, you will see, in my opinion, a huge uptick in affordable healthcare, paid parental leave, strengthening food stamps, strengthening Social Security entitlements, helping essential workers, higher wage, because people are dying. And people nowadays are realizing we're all connected. I need the essential worker. I miss giving people hugs. Oh my God, my community is suffering because my local, laundromat's gone. My local restaurant's gone. Oh my God, my family members who are low income are dying. Even if you're rich and you're wealthy, your wealth is not really protecting you because it can't protect your father, who you can't see right now. And so my dad, who's been here since 1966, saw these protests and he said this, which was very powerful to me. I don't think he even realized what he said. He said, Beta, I think there's hope because the people are out. And it's better than 66, 67 because then the Goras, the whites, went with Nixon. But this time the Goras are with us. They're with us. And the fact that he said us was very powerful because I don't know about those who are listening. My immigrant parents for a long time, they used to say, oh, these Americans. And I always used to challenge them. I'm like, you're an American too. But like, Beta, you know what I mean. But without realizing subconsciously, American meant what? White. Mainstream means white. Rust Belt means white. Ordinary means white. Electable means white, which is bullshit. But my father for the first time said, Beta, they're with us. They're with us. That was very powerful. And so my father, the same man who's very optimistic for the first time in his life, is literally scouting for other places. The fact that he said that, he has some hope. And so we have to hope. And the final thing I'll say is that I choose to sit here and fight. I'll fight till the end. I'll fight. I'm not going to go anywhere because this country belongs to me and my kids. And I have to fight for my children. I'm at that age now. I was talking to my friend who's also, I'm going to turn 40, inshallah. I never thought I'd make it to 40. I thought I'd be dead by 35. So I'm amazed I'm alive. But, if honestly, if I die tomorrow, I have no complaints. I've lived a good life. Really, I have no regrets. My daughter, mashallah, has a new liver. My kid Khadija is sweet. My son Ibrahim is kind boy. My wife is very smart, capable. She'll marry you like 3 months after I die, definitely. She says she won't. Definitely going to happen. So they'll be fine. But it is my role and responsibility as a parent to make sure that I can clean up as much of this shit as possible for my kids, because my kids and that generation deserves better. And I'll be damned if I'm going to let some tiki torch whites with crappy haircuts wearing friggin' Old Navy tell them to go back to where they came from. That's not going to happen. So I made my decision. I told my dad, I said, I'm not going to New Zealand. I'm not going to Canada. I'm not going to Vancouver. I'll fight till the end. There's no way in hell that I'm going to let friggin' Tom Cotton and who else is there? Matt Gates, be the protagonist of the American narrative. No way. Nusseibah friggin' struggled to live. She literally fought like hell for a year to survive. She deserves at least her Baba and that generation to fight for her generation, and inshallah, all those others who deserve a place, inshallah, in the American pantheon. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
All right, I'm staying. But I think something interesting what you said is sort of, thinking about ourselves as Americans. And part of that is sort of when these protests have been happening, that, people in Muslim and South Asian communities, a lot of people I think are thinking for the first time about, well, this is actually happening in my community too. Like, it didn't hit me hard until I saw Hassan Minhaj's segment on it. Reflecting on that, how much work do you think Muslim and South Asian communities have to still do in rooting out kind of anti-Blackness and racism?
Anti-Blackness, colorism? Are you kidding me? Have you seen Indian Matrimonial on Netflix, which we all saw. It was amazing. Yeah. But the fact that they so casually said light skin tone, the fact they so casually said fair skin, which I appreciated because it's raw and honest. They didn't even realize that they were like saying this in front of a global audience that it might cringe, but it reveals us. It reveals us for better and for worse, right? That anti-Blackness, look, going back to 1965 Immigration Nationality Act, right? The model minority, the good family, the good kids, the good college, right? Desis in particular, since you're asking me, right? We're good at spelling. We're good at IT. We're nice. We're good to our parents. We won't rock the boat. We're not thugs. We're the good manager who won't get an invite to the private clubs, but it'll be responsible, right? We won't be the hero, but we'll be the sidekick. And you learn as a student of America, you learn living in America without anyone ever telling you white is right, white is winning, white is American, black is bad. No one sat me down and told me this. You just have to live. You just have to look. You have to watch the show Cops. You have to see how we treat black people on TV and in screens. And you automatically know, yeah, if I got to choose between white and black, I'm running towards whiteness. And then you realize very quickly, no matter what you do, no matter how much Fair and Lovely scream you put on, no matter how, if you change your name from Muhammad to Mo, no matter like if you wear cargo shorts and listen to like, I don't know, Steely Dan, and shop at Abercrombie and like, buy artisanal cheese at Whole Foods, you'll never be white. You'll be asymptotic to white, but you'll never be fully white. And that's why you'll never be fully American to many people. And some people don't realize that. I think my generation realized that. Some people realized it early on, but I'm almost 40. A lot of my friends, we realized that with the rude awakening and the baptism of 9/11, that no matter what our parents did, no matter how much taxes they paid, no matter how much they voted for Republican, no matter how much they were for family values, no matter how much they had a BMW, no matter how much they lived in a suburban gated community, they were not white. They were the other. They were Osama. They were Al-Qaeda. They were ISIS. They were the Muslim terrorist. That too, I think my parents' generation, because I talked to some uncles and aunties, was like a shock. The casual racism that they then experienced, right? And that reminded them, oh, I chased whiteness, but I'll never be white, and whiteness rejected me. But guess who I'm lumped with? The browns, the Mexicans, the blacks, the others, the Latinos, the people who I would never, ever tell my kid, my daughter especially, to marry. And there's been like a 20-year building. This is not to take away from those who've done the work beforehand. I think kind of an awareness and a building of realization that we're kind of in this together. The election of Barack Obama, the mainstreaming of anti-Muslim bigotry. It was the election, ironically, of Donald Trump and his rampant Islamophobia that made many white friends and allies of mine openly tell me, I thought you guys were just being race hustlers and whining and complaining, but you guys were onto something about this anti-Muslim bigotry. But we have to look inside ourselves, because that colorism, just hold anti-Blackness for a second. Look at how we treat, especially women who are dark skinned. The casual racism, to the point where it's so ironic. Kam rang literally translates to less color, but kam rang means someone who's dark. Saaf rang, SAAF transliteration, literally means clean color, translating to someone who's light skin tone, right? And so I believe with Black Lives Matter, I believe with what's happening against Muslims, I believe there is a moment for solidarity and intersectionality. And there's a hopeful shift here. I'll talk about my parents. My parents, like many immigrant parents, just kind of voted Republican in the 80s and early 90s. Family values, tax cuts, the Democrats were seen as liberals, and also then Republicans made an overture to Muslims. My parents, thankfully, around 2000 realized this is wrong. I did my part in the Bay Area of begging Muslims not to vote for Bush, but it was the block vote. And we completely discarded the voices and sentiment of Black Americans and Black Muslims who said, yo, vote for Democrats. Completely selfish, self-destructive, reckless decision that I did not participate in, thank Allah. But now you know, if we are being honest with ourselves, we cannot be hypocrites, especially if you're Muslim and if you're South Asian, because you can't say, yo, this anti-immigrant bigotry of Stephen Miller is wrong and anti-American, and this Islamophobia is hateful. But by the way, I hate those gays. Oh, by the way, those blacks, they cause trouble, don't they? Those Mexicans, they didn't come here the way we came here. Those poor people, they need to work harder. If you say that, as a Muslim and a South Asianite, someone has the right to say, bullshit, you're a hypocrite, you're a munafiq. Because how can you, in 2020, ask people to support Muslims and go against the Muslim ban when you are actively shitting upon Black people, poor people, Mexicans, LGBTQ? No one says you have to agree with gay marriage. No one says you have to agree with everything, but to not stand in solidarity or to completely crap upon them, you, I think, lose moral standing and high ground. And my father and my mom, you know who they, my sas, my susral, my in-laws, you know who they love? They love AOC. Love her. They love her. I'm like, how did this happen? They're like, Beta, she's so bright. She's sharp. She's defiant. She speaks up for people. She's charming. Good for her. We need fighters like that. So does she, if you can see my parents' generation shift, I do believe there is, people give up on people too easily. I don't think they should. And I think people give up on our elders. I know I did when I was a kid, and that's unfair because maybe because I'm older, maybe because I have kids. But to give the elders a bit of props before we go on to the next question or Q&A, you have to realize what they went through. 1965, they came here with nothing. They had limited options. I've talked to uncles and aunties now, and they said, Beta, do you know what I wanted to be? I'm like, engineer, doctor, businessman, of course. They're like, no, I want to be an architect. I'm like, you? Architect? I thought you hate creativity and art. He goes, no. This is like Kashif's father, one of my best friends growing up. He said, I always wanted to be an architect, but I came here. I had to give Pesa money back to the family. There was only 2 jobs that were viable. I wasn't good at medicine. I was good at math. I became an engineer. Then I saved up money and I brought like my mom, my family. And then we brought here, we had to save up money. We had to build a mosque. We were mocked and ridiculed due to our accent. There was still racism. We knew we would never be the CEO, but maybe we could be the assistant manager. You smile your white teeth, you nod your head, you don't rock the boat, you play it conservative, you build up your wealth, you make the American dream, and you hand the checklist to our children. And we didn't come here to this country and give up everything so you could be a freaking English major, right? Faith has to be rewarded, especially for that generation, with tangible aspects of success. And so when our generation busts out of that checklist, and some people, they see me on CNN, or they see Hassan Minhaj, or they see Mindy Kaling, or they see Ibtihaj Muhammad, their faith is rewarded with something tangible. And they literally have told me, I'm skeptical about the arts, but then I see you, and then I see how Americans look at you, code word, the whites, and how they embrace you and accept you with all your mirch and masala and biryani and lota and like fasting and your Hajj trips and you sing inshallah. And I say, maybe there's hope for my kids. maybe they accept me and see me as American, which is why it's so important to build this, what I call multicultural coalition of the willing, the ethnic Avengers. But if we don't clean up our own home, we will be called out as the hypocrites that we are. So we have a lot of work to do. Myself, we all do. And I think especially when it comes to Muslims and South Asians, two things I would say is not just anti-Black and anti-Latino hostility, also for us, and I'm going to make an assumption for those of you who are participating, classism. The way, I grew up in a suburban Bay Area where, let's be honest, people still look down upon people who are poor. And when I was 20, 21, I became poor. And I've lived on both sides. If we can confront classism, if we can confront racism, and if we can fix this gender problem, especially within our religious communities, then I think we have a moral standing to then tell people, oh, look at this thing called Islam, and look at Muslim values and ethics, and look at how we are emerging as leaders in this movement based upon our conduct and our action.
Thanks for letting us come to your TED Talk.
Yes, that's my third TED Talk. You've asked me a simple question. I'm sorry.
No. That's excellent. The only thing I'll say is, for those of you who don't know Steely Dan, he is excellent.
Yeah. And I don't judge anyone who goes to Whole Foods. Artisanal cheeses are fantastic. Steely Dan has great records. Cargo shorts, if you can wear them, Bismillah, man, own it.
Let's do one more question, then go on to Q&A, and we'll give you a hot potato here. Probably the number one subject on Twitter for the past few weeks has been quote unquote cancel culture.
Yeah.
Which was fueled by this open letter in Harper's Magazine. You've weighed in on this debate, and you've talked about your experiences as a CNN commentator in light of all that. Can you, for those of us who are
sure
with that, fill us in on that and sort of how that informs your broader perspective on
So cancel culture, very quickly, is basically a lazy remake of the political correctness battle. So much so, it's the exact same headlines, titles, and words. Just go back and read the titles and headlines. It's almost the same thing. Thought police. Can you say dangerous things anymore? College campuses are the bastion of a new type of fascism. If you literally listen to this, you think college kids who are broke and like enduring student debt are the biggest shayateen on earth, right? We're literally they're literally canceling people left and right. It's basically, in my opinion, the same old story where men and women who are gatekeepers of power feel threatened by the status quo being challenged, by them being challenged, by the narratives being challenged, and then they feel that they are being attacked. And at 1990, it was called political correctness, which never existed before then, but then it became a mainstream talking point and straw man that literally is used to this day, to the point where when I went and talked to Trump supporters, they're like, he's politically incorrect. He says what he wants, which is also a Trojan horse oftentimes for people to launder their misogyny, Islamophobia, and racism. So you saw this in New York Times when Tom Kahn released a op-ed, and it was filled with inaccuracies. And then Black members of the New York Times finally spoke out and broke their social media policy and said, how can we do this while people are being beaten on the streets with police brutality? And then James Bennett, the editor, openly admitted, yeah, no one read the article. And oh, by the way, Tom Kahn, who's an elitist who went to Harvard Law School, had errors in the piece about the Constitution, where he was advocating essentially for military law to crack skulls. So they kept the New York Times op-ed. James Bennett apologized. James Bennett then resigned. And because a lot of people are friends with James Bennett in this tight ecosystem where the gatekeepers are all white guys who don't look like us, they were so threatened, and they're so threatened that if a James Bennett could resign, what will happen to us? Cancel culture. Then Barry Weiss, who was a colleague of mine, self-expelled herself. And she's, you should read her lengthy resignation letter. And she was the one who abused her privilege to write on social media and mischaracterize a closed-door meeting where New York Times editors and staff, people of color, came and talked about this. And she totally mischaracterized it to the point where about a dozen staffers risked their jobs by saying, you're wrong, you mischaracterized this. This is not how it went down. And she dismissed the concerns of people of color as these angry young wokes versus the old guard, right? And then because she was criticized, she's self-expelled. And now you have all these people writing this Harper's letter, and full disclosure, they came to me to sign that letter. Very respectfully, I said, no. In general, I agree with you when it comes to First Amendment. I too am concerned about toxicity of social media and absolutism. I've written about that, but I disagree with the way you're doing it right now. I feel the timing is wrong, and I feel that it will be used as a vehicle to suppress the voices of the marginalized and basically just first world privileged whining of elites. And so that's what we've seen. It's a remake of what's happened with political correctness. No one really has been canceled. All of them still have their jobs. All of them fail up. All of them, like the joke is, I've been canceled. By the way, and now it's a $15,000 honorarium I've got to speak about cancel culture. I've been canceled. Here's my New York Times article to talk about I've been canceled. And the irony is, I've actually been canceled. I've actually been boycotted. I've actually lost speaking engagements. And while I lost those engagements for the past 2-3 years, I've openly said on Facebook, and I say it now, anyone has a right to still boycott me. If you feel that that is the best way for you to promote your ideology or your endeavor, you feel like I'm harmful to it, go ahead. I just reserve the right to use my platform then to counteract that speech, right? And you have every right to counteract me. And the debate that all these people want to have, like, we need to have debate. This is the debate, ladies and gentlemen. The debate's happening on social media, on Twitter, on Facebook, where the hollowed halls of power and the gatekeepers are finally penetrated, and these toxic ideas are finally being like attacked, and the homogeneity, there you go, I felt like I was a Trumpian moment, of both thought and the people who are the thought leaders are being challenged by the rest of us. It's going to be messy, but I think it's a good thing, and you're going to see power that is threatened is going to crack down more and more and more. This is you're witnessing the death rattle of white supremacy in America and around the globe, and you're witnessing people who feel that they're being replaced, which was the #1 anxiety of Trump voters. And a lot of this has to do with not just class, but whiteness. And you're going to see both white conservatives and white liberals really crack down hard. And cancel culture and this fear of being replaced by the darkies is, in my opinion, a type of extension of that.
Wow.
And you work at the New York Times, you know what's up.
Yeah, they never do anything wrong. I'm going to just leave it there.
Never. Keep your health care, keep the job. And I'm sorry about my kids. My kids were running around in the background. It's the best I could do.
No apologies at all. Just going to the comments, Justin wants everybody to know that he's from Arkansas and would like to apologize to the world for Tom Cotton. Akbar had a question which he messaged to me, but I want to give him a chance to ask it himself. There.
Hey, Assalamu alaikum. You mentioned that like Muslim lawyer is really a post 9/11 creation, and I'm guessing your motivation for law school is to ensure like American opportunity wasn't denied to Muslims. What would you still be doing if you were lawyering?
What would I do if I was lawyering?
If you were lawyering, what would you be doing right now?
Okay, so that's a very good
segue into what should we be doing right now.
Yeah. So my generation was the 9/11 generation. I was a senior at UC Berkeley. I was a student leader at MSA UC Berkeley. The towers fell, and I'm sure, like many of you, it was a fork in the road. There was a pre 9/11 and a post 9/11, and instinctually, many of my friends who were trying to figure out what to do with the rest of their lives, we all went to law. Like so many of us went to law, and then also so many of us went to arts and media. So many of us, because I think there was an instinctual realization that in America, if your story isn't being written, if you aren't writing your story is being written for you. And if you're not at the forefront of culture and media and advocacy, you're going to get railroaded. And I think we learned this from our Japanese American brothers and sisters, our Catholic brothers and sisters, African American brothers and sisters. And specifically, I remember after 9/11, the first two groups or representatives of groups who came and talked to me and offered help, Japanese Americans, Catholics. Amazing. Because they said, we've been through this before. And they have. And so what I always tell lawyers is oftentimes many lawyers, attorneys come to me and like they feel despaired, like I'm just a lawyer, man. What should I do, man? I don't know what else to do, man. And I'm like, first and foremost, you have the privileged license, the law license, right? You are literally an advocate. So there are specific legal cases that can push civil rights forward. I mean, see the Supreme Court case where 5-4 I believe it was 5463, where they went for the LGBTQ community and you know, basically protected them. That's huge. Lawyers did that. Right now, I've been helping something called like the Legal Aid in San Francisco. They are helping low-income workers. That's their whole like mission of being. So they're advocating that employers change their policies to basically help these workers and give them paid time if they get sick with coronavirus. Lawyers are doing that. I also think lawyers need to think creatively. Your legal degree and just that license, or someone saying this is lawyer Akbar, for better or worse, the universe thinks you're really smart, which we know is bullshit because we know so many dumbass lawyers, you know, myself included. But like I remember, like in the media when I started off, they're like, "You're a playwright and an attorney? You must be smart." And I'm like, "Yes, I am." There's a premium given to the education and the license, and you can flex that. Just like you see many medical doctors flexing that on CNN and MSNBC today who haven't practiced for 10 years, for better and for worse. Politicians run for office. Use your pen, blogging, social media, educating people about their rights. Try to get on MSNBC, CNN, or try to be the legal liaison for your local newspaper. A lot of times people forget that. You literally can pick up the phone and be like, "Hey, local newspaper, if you ever need anyone to talk about immigration or legal rights or police brutality, I'm your guy." Simple things that go a long way, right? You can simultaneously do all of this. And also, if you have money as a lawyer, some do, some don't, to use your money effectively for raising certain causes, right? I think if we have more attorneys from our community who are willing to engage the political process and also engaging policy. Like a lot of people forget that. They're like, "I'm a doctor, what do I do?" I'm like, "Yo, invest in healthcare policy, run for office, and or literally pick up the phone, talk to your local DNC chapter and say, I want to give you my advice on how to come up with healthcare policy during the pandemic." This is an entryway for you to use your expertise to influence both policy at a national level and a local level. And if for those of you who want to write, I can tell you that just attaching lawyer to your name, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, will help you. It just gives you a leg up because people for some strange reason think, "Oh, lawyer, smart," which we know is BS, but we don't have to tell the world that. And so those are just some ideas of what you can do right now, but don't be too hard on yourself. What I'll also say is we're all surviving a pandemic, and be kind to yourself as well. Do what you can, especially if you have a family, if you have kids, you know, do what you can, but also, this is going to sound silly, man, vote, rally people to vote. I think people say, "What can we do? What can we do? We're just nobody. We're not on CNN. We're not on New York Times. We haven't written a play with Wajahat." I'm like, you can get your family to vote. We got my mother-in-law, who has never registered to vote, to register to vote. We got her friends in Florida to register to vote, a lot of Desi aunties, and they're like, "We're voting for Biden." And that's Florida, a battleground state where you know there's going to be cheating, and you know every vote counts. Every vote counts. And there was Muslims who I know who stayed at home in Pennsylvania and Michigan, and I will remind everyone that we begged people. They said, "But her emails, but Hillary, but she's a warmonger. They're both the same." We're like, "For the love of God, they're not the same. They're not the same." And Donald Trump only won by 78,000 votes across 3 states. He won by a hair. And if Muslims in Michigan had rallied, and some Muslims in Michigan voted for Trump, right? We can do our part in these swing states, ladies and gentlemen, Muslims, to literally turn the tide. And if you prove to Democrats that you can bring out a community and bring out some swing votes, like you can in some parts of Texas and Houston, guess what? They will now be eating from your hands. And I feel like lawyers can play a huge role, especially, Alameen, we're in DC. Most of these guys in DC are lawyers who've never practiced, guys. So if you actually are a competent attorney who knows the law and can practice, just having that premium of lawyer and law degree will help open up spaces in politics, in policy, in media.
Let's do one more question.
You can do 2 more. I'll do quick. I'll answer these questions quickly.
No, I'm enjoying this. Talk about kind of, you know, you have this huge platform on Twitter. You're a New York Times contributing writer. You have the TED speaking thing, which kind of made you famous. You have this huge platform for a lot of Americans. You're probably the only Muslim they see regularly, you know, on TV and in print. how do you kind of think about the role and responsibility that comes with that?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's to quote Spider-Man, who quotes Uncle Ben, who quotes Voltaire, with great power comes great responsibility. I'm the type of kid who, I don't know if it's a Daisy kid, like I apologize for apologizing. I'm the type of guy who, like, if I sneeze and no one's around, I'll still apologize. I'm like, why am I apologizing? It's something that I've had to learn to get rid of. But at the same time, I'm also pretty blunt and transparent. I don't apologize for certain opinions, right? Which, even though my life would be much easier if I did. I think I have unburdened myself of that huge role and responsibility, because it weighs on us so much that sometimes I know it could harm the eventual content. I remember when I was doing the play, it's like, I have to mention everything in this play. I have to mention everything in this, because it's my one shot. It's like 8 Mile. It's like every opportunity is like Eminem and 8 Mile. It's like my one shot. Lose yourself. Do it now. And if I don't like check every box, and if I don't tell every story, then there'll be no other opportunity, and I got to bum rush it all. And it's exhausting. You'll never win. You'll never please anyone. And you'll actually end up producing like content that is just not the best. So what I've tried to do is, instead, I'm aware of that burden. I'm aware of that responsibility. I don't take it lightly. I always try to prepare. When I did CNN, I always prepared, to the point where I'll share a funny story about CNN. It was in our inauguration day. It was 2016. I was not a paid contributor at that time. They brought me in for one segment. It was in DC. The panel of 8 people. But I kicked butt on the panel. So they're like, yo, can you stay for like 2 more hours and do 4 more panels? I'm like, sure. So then I went in the green room. I was all new to me. I'm meeting people. And then they just threw me out for like everything. And then they wanted to have something on Trump foreign policy. And they're like, can you talk about Trump foreign policy? I'm like, I have opinions. I'm like, sure, great. Paid contributors, I won't mention their names, literally told me, what should I say? And I'm like, you could say this. And then back in my head, I'm like, why am I telling you what to say? You're a paid contributor, right? So it's almost like, if you're a person of color, you always have to be magical, and you always have to be awesome, and you always have to be excellent. I was so like, I didn't even know you could bring notes to a CNN stage. Like, I memorized everything beforehand. And like, literally, I'm looking to my right and my left. Everyone has like a smartphone or like a legal pad or like a iPad. And I'm like, you're reading off that? You can bring in notes. You can bring in anything you want. I'm like, huh. And so that burden is still on me, because I realize you're oftentimes representing 1.7 billion people. And if you mess up, not only will it look bad upon me, it will shape the mindset of someone about 1.7 billion people and 1400 years of Islamic civilization. It's there. At the same time, I've allowed myself the freedom to be myself. Late in life, very late in life. I'm almost 40 now. And it's been very liberating. And I feel like if I can concentrate on my specific story and tell it as honestly as possible, it is just one story. And universal truths are found in that one story. I could tell that story the best. I could tell that story most honestly. It gives space and room for other people to then tell their story. And I found that somehow I end up being the best ambassador of myself and my peoples that way. And ironically, when you add in all the merchant masala that everyone told us to take out of our story because it would not translate to the mainstream, that's what stuck with the mainstream. When I'm as honest and authentic as possible. And that's my recommendation for those people. Oftentimes we are told our stories don't have value, our stories don't have wealth, our stories don't have meaning, or our stories don't have mainstream viability. Bullshit. You tell a story well, it wins. And that's how you can Trojan horse, ladies and gentlemen, certain lessons. When you try to do this whole Islam means peace, let me do 10 bulletin points and use my story as a Trojan horse to be a propaganda vehicle, you come off as inauthentic. People call you on your bullshit. It's dry. It doesn't motivate anyone. It comes off as fake. It doesn't work. It just doesn't work. I've tried my best not to do that throughout my career. And now I'm trying to be more and more specific. And what I also try to do, and I've always tried to do this, when people say the Muslim world, I always push back. I'm like, there's no such thing as the Muslim world. There's no such thing as a Muslim community. There are, however, Muslim communities. And going back to the play, I always told people in every print interview, audio interview, I said, this is just one story. And you realize when you are erased from the American narrative in your marginalized community, they look at your story, like Muslims look at my story and they goes, he doesn't have my story, I'm done with it. Like they completely dismiss it. And like my story is more religious, my family's more religious, my family's more secular. This is not my story. And they get so worried, right? Because of this vacuum that Wajahat's story is gonna be the only Pakistani story, Muslim story. I empathize with you. But that's what I've tried to do. And then the final thing I'll say is on the deal, and hopefully people will vouch for me. I've been doing this for a long time. I have tried to use my limited platform to try to bring in some other people and try to publish other people or try to put the spotlight on other people. Can we all do better? Sure. And final thing I'll say is people, I'm always just like, just the way you introduced me, I'm always amused that people think I'm Thanos. Like they think I'm this all powerful media entity. If they only knew the reality if they only knew the reality, but they will, because I'm writing a book. So now you'll know. But my agent laughs at this. He goes, let people think you're powerful and wealthy. That's good. It's a good thing to have. Let them think you're far more baller than you actually are. So that's how it goes, man. It's tough, but I do care and I do try. And I'm sure I fail. I have failed. I will fail. But then, you have to be also a bit easy on yourself. That burden cripples you. The burden to be perfect, the burden to be magical, the burden to right every wrong, the burden to tell every story, the burden to be the ambassador of 1.7 billion people. If you're listening, the sooner that you get rid of that burden that is not yours to bear, your stories and your life will be easier and lighter and more fulfilling.
That's a good note. You did say one more question. I want to just make sure that there's nobody else on the line who has something to ask. And if you do, just feel free to unmute yourself and go.
Thank you guys for staying on. I think it's a sin to bore an audience. So I hope I have not bored you, because I think there's a weak hadith that says, verily, if thou boreth an audience, thou shalt have to listen to Steely Dan. I think it's a weak hadith. It's a weak hadith. I've heard. Don't give me a fatwa. I've heard.
A curated playlist when this is over.
Yeah.
Emails. I guess hearing nothing. I mean, one more thing for me, just curious, what are you reading right now?
Oh yeah, so that's a really good question. I am I have to finish. If you want to pray for me, pray for me. I got to crank out this book in 3 months, which alhamdulillah is a first world problem. But during a pandemic with 3 kids, it's tough. I write from midnight to Fajr. It's the only time I get to write. I'm exhausted. So because of that, I'm in a zone. I've been reading memoirs. I finished up Born a Crime of Trevor Noah. I thought it was very good. I finished up How to Be Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi. I'm reading Heavy right now. I read multiple books at the same time. I just got Cast that just came out by Isabel Wilkerson. I read comic books. So I'm reading Batman, Justice League, Superman, Daredevil. They're the only ones who are shipping right now. And I'm also trying to read I try to keep a hand in fiction. So I'm reading There by Tommy Orange. And I'm finishing up How to Fight Back, which came out 2 years ago. It's a really good book where this guy, Uzma Sabri loves Steely Dan. Thank you. You have one person, Alamin. How to Fight Back is a book of 150 pages written by, it's really good, a strategist who's encouraging Democrats to play hard. And he says, make Puerto Rico and DC into a state, get rid of the filibuster, increase the Supreme Court rights. It's a good book. I recommend people reading. Which one of those books would you recommend? Born a Crime, I thought was fantastic. I think How to Be an Anti-Racist is a solid book. There is brutal, but worth read. Those 3 books I would strongly recommend reading. I just finished Mary Trump's book, which is actually a very well-written memoir, which I recommend people read because it actually gives you insight as to why he is the way he is. I thought it was a good book. It runs quick, 200 pages. I finished that book also about 2 weeks ago. I think they're strong books, and I want to get into Cast. I think that's a good book. And that's what I'm reading right now. There's a couple of other books that I read. Huh?
What are you not reading?
No, I mean, look, that's what I try to do. I don't know how other people are, but I sit after the kids go to sleep. I try to give half hour a day to reading something. And I find out that and I don't know if it's my lack of attention span, but I like jumping around. So if I read too much nonfiction, I like to put a comic book. I try to put in a comic book. I try to put in some fiction, and I try to keep up to date with what's happening in the news. So then I try to come up with, I try to read the briefings with the New York Times, some good articles. But if you put in a half hour a day, I think, you know, you can be informed. I try.
Yeah, fair enough.
What advice do you have for those of us who are dealing with systemic discrimination at educational institutions and are trying to avoid legal action? Wow, Ali Amar. Very quick. This is a moment, ladies and gentlemen, where I can tell you in the corporate environments, and I've been very lucky, law, cable, news, media, New York Times. This is a moment where, just like 2 years ago with Me Too, people are terrified. People are terrified of the skeletons in their closet. People are terrified of a hostile workplace. If you're listening to what's happening with the Ellen DeGeneres audit that's happening right now, you kind of have an upper hand in this moment, where if you were to use your platform and come up with a narrative backed up with facts and evidence that talks about a hostile workplace, especially when it comes to gender or race, put them on blast. Put them on blast. And especially if you feel like if you put them on blast and there's retaliation, voila, you have the legal right. It's tough, I know, especially during a pandemic where everyone's desperate for a job, but I'm just letting you know that there's a moment right now where you have a very susceptible, diverse American audience, and every corporate entity right now is terrified and trying to clean house preemptively.
Dude, thank you so much for your time. I know you have a lot going on. And I think on behalf of everybody, like it kind of means a lot to see you on TV and in the New York Times, you know, to see a person like us who looks like us, who talks like us. It is very powerful. So thank you for doing that. Good luck with the book, and look for that Steely Dan email.
All right.
Thank you tonight.
And Alia, she's in the chat. It's been forever since I did employment discrimination, but you have resources here. I would recommend legal recourse, obviously, but I'm just giving the lay of the land when it comes to narrative. And as you guys know, as lawyers, everything has to do with narrative as also. There is a moment here. There is a moment here to take advantage of a sympathetic environment to us people of color, where instead of people just rolling their eyes or it's like those darkies always whining about, you know, these race hustlers playing the race card, people are on blast. So that's all I'm gonna say. And thankfully I hope you have the assistance of your legal community and this awesome organization. My wife is staring at me with death stares, so I gotta run. But thank you for those who listened. I hope this was helpful. I hope at the very least it wasn't boring. Thanks for inviting me, and be kind to yourselves and be kind to each other. Inshallah, hopefully we emerge from this as better people.
Oh, thanks a lot, man. Really appreciate it.
Take care. Take care, guys.